Right, we get that as usual. We do a quick intro on chapter activities and great things that are happening. We are here now in March. I'm Alex Salas, your president, and I'm excited to share with you what's happening here in March and also ahead for us. February and March are usually the best months here in Orlando. Especially if you're a learning professional. Why? Because we have big conferences coming in. So usually we have Training Mag coming in for the past 2 years, been that way. And we also have Learning Solutions. So Learning Solutions happens at the end of March. And this lady right here with us today, which is running the chapter, she's going to be presenting for us today. Debbie Richards is president of ATD Houston, and she is also presenting at LSCon. So, as you guys know, we bring you the best of the best, and that's why she's here. And aside from that, just wanted to make you aware, we sent an email this morning about WILD, the Weekend in Learning and Development, is our annual conference, and that is taking place August 14th. It's a very special one. We have Niels Floor coming from Netherlands, the creator of Learning Experience Design as a concept, and also Sardik Love, who's a very renowned facilitator. So if you're a trainer out there, a facilitator, you want to come to this workshop, the Facilitating with Impact workshop. We also have, so those are two master classes actually that are happening, and we also have Karen North joining us. So that will happen on August 13th, and August 14th is the actual day of the conference. So we have the master classes on the 13th, and the conference on the 14th. We sent the blast this morning, general email. And so check that out. It has a link to the website. And anyway, if you want to get there yourself, it's ATDCFLwild.org. So trying to make it easy for you. Aside from that, guys, it's been a fantastic month, and our blog will reflect it. Our VP of Communications, Lisanne Zoldi, will release that by next week, and our blog is in our internal site. You can go check it out at any point, and she'll give you a recap of what happened in February. But we again grew in double digits, and our community continues to grow stronger. So excellent stuff. And I think that is my job. That is my recap for the year. I did post over on LinkedIn, if you got a chance to look at that we were regarded by ATD, we're recognized by ATD for our involvement in Employee Learning Week, which happens in December. And so we'll be doing that again this year. But so far, we look great. We're shining out there, and then we're able to bring some great speakers. So it is my pleasure today to introduce to you guys Debbie Richards. She's an expert in many areas. And one of the areas she's been focused along for a while is immersive technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality. We have an episode of Off the Cuff that we have a great discussion about that, and you can go check it out at any point. But we also have her here today to share with us her presentation, which will be the actual presentation that she does over in Realities 360, which is co-located with Learning Solutions Conference. Aside from that, remember that Learning Solutions happens at the end of March, and she'll be there. And I was really excited when I was able to ask her to come and speak to us, and she graciously accepted. So really grateful for that, and would like to welcome you, Debbie. Welcome to ATDCFL.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me see if I can share my presentation with everybody.
I'll go ahead and get my dome out of the way. There you go.
All right. Can you see everything there?
Yes, we can see it. By the way, in terms of participation, guys, Debbie wants you to be very interactive in this webinar. And if you have any questions, use the chat and ask your questions, or also be able to come on the mic if you have the capability to do so. And thank you, Debbie. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm coming to you from Houston, Texas. I'm actually in the conference room with one of my clients, and we are working on an immersive learning program here at my client's office. So this is something that I live and breathe as well as talk about. I wanted to start off and just define for you, if you don't already know, what I think are the two components of, whoops, I'm going to just try to auto advance. So I am going to just change something here really quick so I can do this. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the differences are between virtual reality and augmented reality. And through the session, I'll be showing and sharing some information about these technologies, talking a little bit about an implementation plan and other things that you can do. And then just to let you know, I have given my deck to Alex so you can have that. And I've also given him a document that is from a white paper that I wrote from ATD last year. That's a checklist for augmented reality, but you can also use that for virtual reality. So the differences for me between the two types of technologies that I consider the major component of immersive learning is, with virtual reality, you are in a environment where you have, where maybe wearing a headset, but your vision is completely in this visual world. And with augmented reality, you're going to overlay that virtual world on top of the real world. And those are the two big differences between the two technologies. Here's another example to show you. This is a, if you had a monitor and you were looking at it in the real world, and then if you were going to add augmented reality, as in the second example here, you can see some overlay of some materials that you see next to the monitor. In mixed reality, you will see both the room you're in and maybe the monitor is a virtual representation. And then finally, in virtual reality, you are totally immersed and you're looking at that monitor and sitting someplace that is all in a virtual world. So that's the continuum going from the real world all the way to the virtual world. Now, we have been thinking about whether or not we can get into virtual reality for a while. And there are a number of people who have already made that investment. And I thought this was a really interesting statistic. And on all these things that I'm showing you, I have the site listed so you can go out and look at that information. But the thing that's interesting to me here is that the spend for virtual and augmented reality is going to reach $18.8 billion this year, which is really interesting. And then thinking about when these technologies will become mainstream in your organization, there you can see the trends that for the next 1 to 5 years, there's going to be a big uptake of both AR and VR with organizations that are exploring and implementing these technologies in their organization for learning and development, for marketing, and other aspects of communications. Here's just a couple of examples of where people are using technologies. So the first example is with Boeing. So Boeing is using augmented reality for airplane wiring schematics. And what that allows them to do is to have the technicians wearing HoloLens glasses be hand-free, so they can be looking at their the airplane and the information and have access to the schematics off to the side as they're doing it. And as you can see, this has cut their wiring production time by 25%, and it's also reduced their error rates to 0. Another example is with BMW, where they're using VR to test out how various components of a car look like when they're assembling it. And this cuts down the cost of engineering processes as well. Another example is with Pacific Gas and Electronic, where they're using VR for ways for their folks to inspect equipment and lowering the risk of technicians getting hurt. And then finally at Airbus, they're using it to integrate digital mock-ups into their production of assembly environments, so they can have 3D models of the aircraft while they're doing production. So those are just a couple of examples of where people are using these different technologies. So let's dive down into a little more details about augmented reality. Now, in augmented reality, I said before, it's overlaying the virtual world on top of the real world. So in this example, you can see somebody who's wearing a HoloLens headset, which allows them to see the real world, but then they can see, as in this example, an overlay of schematics and information that they can get to. And the big thing about this, and I've indicated this on the slide, is that you are pulling content rather than having the content pushed at you. So you're getting it at the moment of need. And we see a lot of use in augmented reality for performance support, where people are able to use augmented reality to find information on quickly. For example, if you took training in a training class or online on how to use a forklift, and then you were having to go out into the factory and actually use the forklift, you could use augmented reality to get just-in-time performance support on the detailed checklist on safety, or maybe just a refresher on how to operate certain components of the forklift, and have that just in the moment of need out the factory. So AR is used, like I said, in a number of different ways, but where we're seeing it in the L&D organizations is in the area of performance support. This is a really good white paper if you're interested in understanding where people are using augmented reality in the industrial enterprise. There's lots of examples, there's use cases and information, and I wanted to provide that to you because I think it's a resource to get that information. Because the first thing, if you go into your organization and you want to try augmented reality, somebody's going to say, well, where are they using it and how are they using it? So I wanted to give you a good resource. Another good resource is this article by Harvard Business Review, and this is an article collection that's designed for managers, and it talks about how you can deploy augmented reality and some of the choices that companies are facing when they're integrating augmented reality into their strategy, and understanding when you should use augmented reality versus virtual reality. So again, this is a great example. The thing I really like about this particular set of articles is that the articles are actually augmented. So when you download that series of articles, what you'll see is the ability to download an augmented reality app from Harvard Business, and then you open the app and you point it at any of the objects that are on the page and they come alive. And so if you're trying to give an example in your organization and you want to showcase something, you can print out, for example, this first page and then show the folks in your meeting this example. I think a lot of times people need to see it before they really get an understanding of it. And this is a great example for you to share with folks in your organization. A white paper, like I said before, on seeing the possibilities with augmented reality, where I talk about some of these use cases and about a plan to get started with augmented reality. And you can go out to the ATD website and you can purchase this. But what I've given Alex is this little checklist, which gives you, to get started, it gives you some ideas on some of the things that you can do to get started with augmented reality and that whole process. And my checklist is also augmented. So there's a little code up here in the upper right-hand corner that you can download the Zap code mobile app, and then you can zap it and you'll get some information over here in the job aid. So hope that you'll do that and you'll enjoy finding out more about augmented reality as well. So before I go dive into some components about virtual reality, I wanted to just stop for a minute and see if anybody had any questions on augmented reality and some of the uses and things that you can do with augmented reality. Alex, you have to unmute anybody if they want to talk.
Yeah, we got it covered here. Go ahead, Rachel.
Hi, Debbie. I am an instructional designer. I'm in a consulting capacity, and I have a client who has a series of warehouses throughout the United States. So one of the solutions that we are looking to propose for them is augmented reality or perhaps virtual reality. One of the problems that we're having is a lot of the people who are hired don't have any prior warehouse experience. So they're coming in and they have to play Tetris, if you will, with all the boxes to make sure they're all stacked on the pallet and nothing's sticking out so you can shrink wrap it and ship it. So using actual boxes from the inventory of the warehouse is really not ideal. So could augmented reality or perhaps virtual reality be a good solution for them to learn how to properly stack that pallet so everything fits together?
Yeah, I would look more towards virtual reality for that solution. And I'll tell you why is because you're asking them to perform a task. And with augmented reality, it's really good for you to provide information, and you can interact with augmented reality. So you could click on things. So you could practice maybe doing some of that stacking. But I think a better solution would be virtual reality. And actually, the company that I'm working with to produce a virtual reality project actually has done something similar to what you're wanting to do with DHL. And I can send a link to what they're doing if you would like to take a look at that. What they did is they came up with the project because a DHL has to stack boxes inside of aircrafts, and they have to be very efficient in the way that they stack those boxes. And so they developed a virtual reality exercise for them to do that. And to actually launch the project, they did a game where two people could come into the environment together, and they could be timed, and they could see who could be most efficient in stacking the boxes in a certain amount of time. And it was very, very successful. They're actually rolling that out worldwide now. So I'd be happy to send you some information on that particular project and what they're doing.
I would love that. Thank you.
Great. Okay, any other questions?
Yes.
Hi, Ricardo. You have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi. Am I unmuted?
You are.
Okay, perfect. How are you today, Debbie?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, awesome. So I am a learning experience designer in the tech space. And one of the responsibilities that I have, just always sort of testing new technology and providing just different solutions, and specifically around AR, VR. When you're kind of hitting the ground running with where the technology is, and you just want to really introduce individuals to the capabilities of AR and VR, might you have any recommendations of any sort of icebreakers, perhaps, just kind of early stages that kind of, introduces people at first level, like this is maybe technology isn't their wheelhouse, and you just want to get them acclimated with just some of the possibilities within using it in a training space, really just for purposes of an icebreaker?
Sure. So there's several things I can recommend. And one thing I'll tell you is at Realities 360, I am doing a one-day workshop the Sunday before the conference starts. And I will be doing just that. I will be working with group of people, showing them how to build those icebreakers, both in augmented reality and virtual reality. So you have something to take back to your organization to show them and to showcase both technologies, because I think until people see it, they don't really understand the capabilities and what you can do. I did an icebreaker with augmented reality at the ATD Technology Conference, and I've actually done done it here in Houston with our, at some of our different geographical groups. And what I did is I created what I called an augmented reality escape room. And I had augmented reality scanned objects throughout the room. I gave everybody a list of questions. And in order to find the answer to the questions, they had to go and scan all the different augmented reality objects in the room. And those objects either gave them an image with some information that would help them figure out the answer, or it might, you know, would play a video, or it would lead them to a website, all these different things that I considered part of the performance support aspect of augmented reality. And this also led them to come up with the answer. And I was standing at the door to the room, and they had to give me the answer to get out of the room. And this was a great example just to show how you could use augmented reality in a facilitated discussion to get people up and moving and interactive. And then I did a debrief and kind of walked everybody through the exercise, and also walked through some of the challenges that people would have with technology. So that's one example that I can share with you. But if you're, if you're available at the end of the month, I would highly recommend coming to Realities 360, either to my workshop or to the conference, because there'll be a number of people who will be showcasing similar technologies and solutions for both augmented reality and virtual reality.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that.
Great. All right. Any other questions before I move on?
I don't see any other raised hands, so
okay.
Go ahead.
All right, so let's talk about virtual reality. So with virtual reality, there are lots of different applications that you can use for training, and I've listed some of them here. So you can use it, of course, for health and safety, for training in that respect, running through processes and product onboarding, simulations and maintenance procedures. The project that I'm going to be doing here with my client is we are actually going to be simulating the processes for assembly in a manufacturing environment for one component that they're having some issues with. So we're going to use that as our pilot to run through those procedures and to make sure that everyone understands what they need to be doing. We're going to do it in a classroom environment with a coach and a mentor, and then allow them to practice. And then finally, we're going to have an assessment of what they're doing. Some of the benefits of virtual reality training is there are studies that show that it does improve productivity and safety, and it allows people, I think the big thing is it allows them to explore and train before they have to go out in the field. So when you think about somebody having to go out and do something in the real world, and you give them an opportunity to try and fail in virtual reality so they can test what they're doing, or also allow them to work with equipment that they may not be able to work with in a training environment in the real world. So for example, the DHL example, it's also, it's not really feasible for those trainees to go out in an airplane and to practice loading that equipment. But in virtual reality, they can practice over and over again, and they can make sure that they understand it before they go out in the real world. So there are a lot of really good benefits for using virtual reality training out in the field. So I look at virtual reality training at 3 different levels. So the first level is having just one user using the system alone. And that's a really good solution when you don't have a lot of internet connectivity. You don't need to work in a team so that you can work by yourself. But what we're seeing more and more is people using it in a collaborative environment. So where the process requires teamwork and cooperation. For example, let's say you are simulating some sort of safety situation, and you have somebody who's working out on the floor of the manufacturing field, and then somebody else who's working in a control center. And there are processes that each person has to take. So you can simulate that in VR And those people can be working together, or as in the example here on the screen, where you have two people working side by side operating equipment. This is a fantastic use of VR to allow people to work together on a solution. And then finally, as I pointed out earlier, the use of VR for in a competitive environment where you have people working against each other. And so this screenshot is of people working in that DHL environment, and it allows a level of fun, you know, when you compete against each other, and it also increases engagement and adoption. So I know a lot of people talk about that single user use of VR, but I really like for you to kind of open up and think about the multi-user collaborative components of VR and how that can be used as well. There are multiple levels of engagement as well. For example, you could have the observation engagement, where you could have somebody who is in a headset and then another person who could be watching that person. They could be watching them either in a recording or in a browser environment. And this is really good when you don't have a lot of VR equipment, but you want to have a high level engagement and connectivity with people who are watching and engaging in that training. Then there's the guided learning approach. So you could have within the VR environment, you could have tooltips where they gives information for the learner on what to do. You could also have someone who is a coach or a mentor who is either watching in a browser or might be in their headset, who is giving step-by-step instructions and showing the person what to do. And then you can also have the practical learn environment where the person would just have access to the information in a free mode. So they would work like they work in the real world. They wouldn't have those tooltips available, and they would be required to go through and practice what they've learned in the guided. And then finally, you could have an assessment where you can have a set of procedures that you want that person to perform. And as they're going through the process, you could be collecting the information on whether or not they did the task correctly. You could be tracking whether or not they looked in the right place, how long it took them, and then you would have that information stored out in the cloud someplace, be able to download that data, bring it into a learning record store or another type of technology using XAPI data and do some analytics. And this really allows you to automate the process and to take it to a higher level. And when I talk about the clipboard-based assessment, where normally you might have somebody standing by a person, and as they go through tasks, marking off if they've completed it, well, doing this in a virtual world allows us to collect so much more data and information about what they're doing. And then when you have a number of people that are performing this task and you can do a collective assessment, you can really scale up and make some determinations and look at process improvement, risk management, and other things that go beyond just learning and performance. Okay, so I'm gonna talk next about getting started with these technologies. But before I do that, I'm just gonna do a quick gut check and see if anybody has any questions about what I talked about so far with virtual reality.
All right, make sure you click your icons at the bottom to raise your hand or look in your options if you have any questions. So far, so good. We get from Rachel. Okay, good.
Okay, great. So let's talk about getting started in these technologies. So either one of these technologies, I think there needs to be a good reason to deploy the technology. The worst thing you can do is just say, hey, I'm interested in immersive learning and I want to go off and do something. You've got to have a good reason, and you also need to develop a strong business. I think that going out and talking to someone in the safety department or in a department that may help engage in immersive learning is a great idea. Don't try to come up with something based out of L&D. You need the evangelist, you need that support. So find that person that's going to really help you build that application, and consider starting with a pilot program. Also, you need to take security into consideration immediately. So get with the folks in IT and make sure that they know about what you're trying to do, whether it's deploying via augmented reality or virtual reality. With augmented reality, many times you'll be using your smart devices to activate the augmented reality experience. It may involve downloading an app. If you're using enterprise systems, you've got to make sure that those are approved through the IT department. HoloLenses will access that data, and you just need to make sure that everybody is okay with where you're accessing the information and how you're doing it. With virtual reality as well, if you're going to be getting folks into the system via single sign-on or storing data on the cloud, you really need to involve IT or whoever else is involved to make sure that you're not going to be bringing in a cybersecurity risk into the organization. So pilot, there's 4 main silos that you need to be thinking about with the pilot. The first one is hardware. Thinking about when you're doing this pilot, are you going to be deploying an augmented reality versus virtual reality solution? And then once you've picked that technology, what kind of hardware are you going to need? Are you going to use, if it's augmented reality, you're going to use smartphones versus an augmented reality headset? If it's VR, what type of headset or technology you're going to use? The next is content. What type of content do you have? And then how do you want to work with that content? What's your strategy for the process? Then how are you going to distribute the pilot? Are you going to work in one environment? Are you going to have a couple of locations that you're going to test it out? And then finally, data. How are you going to collect data? And then what are you going to do with that data? I built this model along with Hugh Seaton called Added, around the idea that we're going to have to expand the ADDIE process to include a couple of other things. So when you're thinking about these technologies and you're doing your analysis work, I think the number one component is what's missing from the current approach, and then how can augmented reality or virtual reality or some type of immersive learning help you with that. And then think about the technologies and tools that you have to use to achieve those goals. You'll go into design. The design of an augmented reality experience is slightly different than what you're doing for your normal courses. So it's more scenario based many times. So if you've done scenarios or simulations before, you know that you've got to come up with a narrative, and you have to design this just like you would any other type of experience. Then you need to, as you go through and develop the prototype, you'll have multiple stages that you'll work through. So first stage might be a simple wireframe and just an idea of how you're going to be doing it. And then you'll do iterations with that and understand what's needed in each one of the aspects. When I talk about presence, I'm talking about, what are you going to need before the experience and after, which really comes into the development. How are we going to integrate this into what we're doing? If you're going to, for example, have that as part of a course, you might have someone take an e-learning module or take a facilitated class first to understand a little bit about the background of the subject and some information. And then you may have them go in and experience the application in a VR or an AR world, and then come back and debrief them, maybe do some mentoring with a coach if they had some issues with what they were doing. And so there are some different types of things that you're going to have to consider. And then you'll also want to consider what type of analytics you're going to need out of this, and what you're going to do with those analytics. And then finally, with the deployment, how are you going to deliver it? How are you going to upscale it as you're bringing it out? If you're doing VR, how are you going to do an enterprise launch of your application once you've gone through the pilot? So these are all things that you need to consider. And I go into more detail about the added process in the white paper that's out there on the ATD site. With the document that I sent to Alex, there's actually some information on that as well, to kind of give you some items to think about and to consider as you're going through this process. Here's an example. This is out of the request for proposal in the design document that I created for the project that I'm working on right now. And what we decided we were going to do is we were going to have 4 steps in our process, and it's an on-the-job training methodology. So first, we're going to tell the participant, we're going to give them information on how to have this VR experience, how to navigate it, and then we're going to take them into the VR experience and show them how to do it. We may show a movie of how the person is performing the task. We're going to demonstrate that, and then also make sure that they're using the proper security components. We will have them try it, and then we will record the information that they're doing and then provide feedback to them. So this is a layout of how we defined what we wanted to do and what we wanted to get out of our pilot that we're doing in our learning experience project. Now, when you're doing that pilot and you're working through some of these components, make sure that you include everybody so that they have a stake in what you're doing and that they also understand what it takes to do the project, as well as being able to take it to the next level. And I think at a basic level, besides the L&D team, you need to have the stakeholders, you need to involve IT and legal, and then also the data owners. And then, you're going to decide for the pilot what technologies you're going to use. Now, if you're just doing a simple pilot, and Ricardo, when we were talking about, just getting something in and showcasing the technology, these are 2 tools that I would recommend that you could use that are real basic, and you can get a 30-day free trial of either one of them. One is a product from Zappar, would allow you to create some augmented reality experiences. And the other is Adobe Captivate 2019, which allows you to create a virtual reality project. It's not a full-featured product. It utilizes 360 videos and 360 imagery, but you can still have that interactivity and have that experience. So these are 2 tools on the low end if you want to do something in-house and you want to just have a basic understanding of the tool set. And sometimes this is a good solution, to get something in there and get going. And this is what I'll be using at my workshop at Realities. We'll work with both these tools all day long, and you'll come out of this with a couple of projects that you'll be able to utilize. So quick plug for my session at Realities. Now, you may decide to have an agency help you with a project, especially if you're doing a little more complicated VR project. And typically what you'll have is you'll have project managers on that team. You may have people that are developing the application in a software environment like Unity or Unreal. There may be artists or animators or different people working in the background for you. There may be an interface designer and a QA team that help you, but this is real typical of what you'll see with an agency that's going to be working with you to develop a project. Now, as far as delivery options, you could have, like I said, single user or multi-user, and a lot of the applications can be deployed for VR with a range of headsets. It's really exciting right now because technology's improved. We're doing a lot of work with Oculus Quest headsets, which don't require wires, and they have their own memory and information, so you don't have to have them tethered to a computer. If somebody doesn't have access to a headset, a lot of applications can also be delivered via the web. And then there are some that have a combination of both that VR and that web technology as well. And then when you're looking at that, you can also have people in multiple locations. So in this example, we have people all over the world that are accessing this VR simulation. So there's somebody in a headset in San Francisco, somebody in London, somebody's watching it on the end, and then the main person is in Sydney, Australia. So with this blended delivery approach, allowing you to have multiple people in multiple locations, you can really see the power of VR, where you can come together in a virtual world and have those experiences. And in today's world, with some of the things that are going on, having folks being able to come together in this virtual world and have a solution for them is very, very important. So this is, I just wanted to share this with you because I think this is really interesting about what's happening with Oculus Quest. So I'm working with this company, Immerse, and we're working through this for the organization I'm working, the pilot I'm working on. So the idea is that on the Quest, our students are going to open this app. They're going to enter a PIN number, and this PIN number is going to be tied back to their single sign-on so that we can capture the information in the cloud as they're going through the application. So we authenticate the user, and then we get the content that they're going to be using, and then they will launch and complete the assessment. The assessment will generate information and save it out to a database, and then we're going to be able to send that information to a learning record store so we can do some analysis with it as well. So, this is the distribution that we're looking at too. So here you have content creation on the left-hand side, where you've got information, if you're using a good platform, where you can have some good content management as well. In the middle, you have that VR training experience, and it could be single user or multi-user. It doesn't matter what platform they're working on. They can access it via VR or the web, and they can access it online or offline. So in the Quest, you could have an offline experience, and then when you can connect to online, you could be sending that data back to the system. On the right-hand side, from the enterprise system, you could flow in the user management information. And for me, that's critical because I want to tie their experience with their user information so I can get that data and then feed that back down into a learning record store or into Power BI or however I'm going to interpret the data that I'm collecting. And that's the true power of an enterprise VR platform that you can consider. So here's the idea that for this system, you could be collecting 30 data points per second or more for a user, and then that information is aggregated in the cloud, and you can use that and replay that information and do what you need to do with it. Here's this idea of that collaborative environment. In this example, we have the trainer who's in VR and then two trainees, and they are in this virtual world and learning about what they're doing. We call them ghost trainers if they're in the VR experience with the students, and then they can demonstrate and work with our trainees as well. And then when you have these ghost trainers, you could also record information. So you could have a VR experience where you could have the trainer who's there and can be recorded, and then you can go back into VR and watch that recording and watch that ghost trainer, which is kind of interesting, but and it's just another aspect of that as well. Everything that you do in VR could be tracked and recorded. And so here's an example, and I'm going to drill down into it. So for example, here's some examples. This is from the Immerse system as well. So these are all these recordings. So as we're going through and we're working through an example, we can record the experience, but then we can go back and play the recording again. We can put on our VR headset and actually be in that experience where somebody had recorded and done this previously. Then you can also look at some information from a reporting aspect. You can look at, okay, how long did they spend in this recording? How many people did we have? How many actions were recorded? And I can export that information as well. And I can look at, for XAPI, I can look at all the different actions and see the things that they did. So you can see here are some actions. So they did complete this action. They did not complete this action. Here's where they picked up this valve lock and they put it back. They didn't complete this. So I can see all those steps and in the time. And then I can export that information if I want to an Excel spreadsheet. And I can also import it directly into a learning record store or into some other technologies if I want to as well. All right, so here are some ideas around some of the things that, that you might consider to do when you're thinking about moving towards immersive learning. First, we're going to have to upskill our workforce, and we're going to have to recruit for augmented reality and VR skills. Talked about that agency approach where you'd have people who could work in Unity or could work in Unreal. If you just decide to deploy this at an enterprise level, you want to look for folks that you eventually, unless you just want to hire out to an agency, you may want to have folks internally who have these type of skills. You may want to bring in somebody who has CAD or graphic experience and different type of folks into your organization that you'd never thought about before. It's really, really important to have some sort of governance and structure with the activities and with the folks that you're working with to build these experiences. That's one of the things that we're doing in our pilot. So we are documenting all the way from the request for proposal through the final deployment, and we're coming up with all our processes. We're building templates. We're building things that we can be using, because we know that once we get the pilot out there and get it out in the world, then we're going to be hit with all sorts of folks that want to do similar projects, and we need to be able to scale up and be able to provide those, and we don't want to take a long time to do that. So just like you do in other aspects of learning and development, where you build templates, you build those processes, you have that governance structure, you really need to do that for your immersive learning projects as well. It's so important to find the right use case when you're piloting and you're creating your initial project, because that's going to help you with folks who are going to be your evangelists and who are going to help you move forward as you decide to do more projects, or if you decide you don't want to do anything right now because of capacity or cost or things that are involved. But you really need to find the right case that's going to make a good impact. And then finally, you're going to need to work with your IT, your cybersecurity team, your other organizations to prepare that technology infrastructure to support AR and VR. You don't want to have to be the help desk person who's going to be doing the support as well as other things. So you're going to have to incorporate all of that as far as your governance and deployment as you're bringing those things out into your environment. It's an exciting world. It's a really interesting time to be in the L&D space. I feel like I've been in this space for a long time. I've worked through working in multimedia and then bringing learning to the internet, and now we're looking at immersive learning. And I'll just tell you frankly, a lot of the things that we did in each one of those other stages, where we can apply that to immersive learning as well. We just need not to get sucked into the glamour and the interesting components of immersive technology, and to go back and remember what we're doing in the first place. We're using this to enhance that learning experience. So I'm going to stop here and see what questions you have. I've got some of my contact information here as well. So what other questions do you have?
You guys hear me? Can you hear me, David?
I can hear you, Alex.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, we see Rachel.
You had mentioned that there is a blended approach where you can have the headset and then you can have like a moderator and then other people seeing what they're seeing. Is that exclusive to one particular company that does that, or are there lots of different ways that we could implement a solution like that?
So there are a number of companies that are doing that. There are also a number of companies, like for example, marketing agencies that are creating VR experiences that are single user experiences. But if you come to Realities 360, even if you could just come to the expo, I don't know what the cost is for that, but you can go out to the e-learning guild site and look at it. But there'll be vendors there that'll be showcasing some of the things that they're doing. And a lot of vendors are using this multi-user experience.
X will be free for ATDCFL members.
There you go.
Send an email to communications@atdcfl.org. We'll post it on the member site as well. There'll be a code. We have a question from Kenneth. It says, are you involved in any marketing projects currently?
Most of the projects that I'm involved in are learning and development projects. That's the lane I operate in, but I do know some agencies that are doing marketing projects. So if that's an interest of yours, either in AR or VR, I can provide some good resources for you. And I do know, and I'm sorry to keep plugging the Realities Conference, but guys, it's going to be in your backyard in a couple of weeks. So there'll be vendors there as well. Even though they're in the learning space, there are some vendors that are doing also marketing projects that you can visit at the conference.
Yeah, if you guys don't make it to Realities or LSCon, because I know a lot of people travel, we are doing an event with UCF where we're going to have the opportunity for you to try VR and AR. The reason I say that is because some of us do some of these things. If you can make it there, guys, don't worry. June, we got the summer sizzle with UCF and it's coming. I gotta remap my songs because you're all up in my face.
Well, I'm like I said, I've got my information up here, guys, and I'm happy to share some resources
Absolutely.
or contacts with you. I think, it's a collaborative world. I'm in here. I work really closely with my ATD Houston chapter. We have a conference coming up at the end of April where we're also going to be showcasing a lot of new technologies. Our keynote speaker is Tim Slade, and we'll have a number of folks that'll be doing different things that have to do with technology-based learning, and we'll be showcasing what some of our members are doing with augmented reality and virtual reality. So if you want to come to Houston, you are welcome, and we'll extend our chapter member discounts to you as well.
Oh, that's right. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Debbie. So I had a question for you. So I don't see any other questions. I do have a question that I wanted to ask. Was how did you deal with? I can see this happening to be very heavy with people that are gamers, that are very familiar with things. How do you deal with people with the barriers of using VR? So there are people that will have nausea and will have, vertigo and things like that.
Yeah, I think, that's a question that everybody always asks. And I think one of the things is you have to limit their time in the application. So a typical experience may only be from 5 to 10 minutes in the system. And you have to give them a trial period. You can't expect somebody to put on a headset and use the haptic devices and to be an immediate expert. I'm kind of klutzy myself in the applications. And you have to have the time to, it's like any new tool that you use. You have to learn how to use it. So you have to give people time to do that as well. And you're going to always have people, whether it be augmented or virtual reality, who are going to have some challenges in using it. So you have to work with those folks. And it may not be the right approach for everybody. You know, it's just like with any other kind of learning. There are people who have different learning styles that learn better in a classroom or like online learning. Immersive learning may not be the answer for everyone. So you have to be adaptable for that. But it is a chance for them to have that experience, to have that just-in-time information, and to transform learning. And you know, I think we just, like I said, when I was talking about governance and processes,
I'm gonna cut you off in a sec, because we got a question from Ricardo, and we're almost out of time. Go ahead, Ricardo.
Hey, Debbie, so I'm actually in Austin, and I'd love to attend the conference that you were referring to in Houston. I'm sure you're aware of our annual South by Southwest, which brings all sorts of different conferences regarding technology, but unfortunately, the likelihood of the cancellation, it looks like that might happen due to the coronavirus. So hopefully, you know, that doesn't happen, but regardless, I would still love a backup. And so where can I get some more information about the Houston conference?
So you can go to tdhouston.org, or you can send me an email. My information is here on the screen. This is my company, and I'm happy to send you some information about the conference. And I'm happy to extend a good discount for you as well. Right
Excellent.
now, we're still planning on having our conference. We are initiating some safeguards and some safety safeguards as well. We've decided to become a no handshake chapter, among other things. But we're going to, until we've been told otherwise, I think right now our conference is still going to be gone. April 22nd is the date.
Excellent. Emailing you right now. Thank you.
Okay, sounds great.
Cool. I put the links in the chat. I also got, well, so I think at this point, I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much, you guys, for your questions. I definitely want to thank you, Debbie, for this. It's been very informative and great. I think people really appreciate it based on the engagement. And we got some thank yous coming around. I also post a lot of links in the chat, guys, so go check it out. We have the presentation and the links for her downloads available on the member site. And I'm leaving you also a video that I did with my daughter. She was 10 at the time. And she set up the virtual set that I'm using here. So that will give you an idea that this is not something that you have to be like so techie about. So thank you, Debbie, again. Thank you, guys. And everybody have an awesome rest of your day. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.